Hello? No. I'm sorry. I can't have lunch with Sarah today. It's because I'm actually having brunch with Doug and Gabe and Terry. No, maybe next. I'll be right with you. So maybe next week. Okay. So sorry. Hello, and welcome. This is Beyond the Green Room. I'm David Edwards, and as you heard in that song, I'm not having lunch with Sarah today. I am having a virtual brunch with three of my oldest friends, and we are going to discuss, maybe debate, probably dish, and hopefully delight on all things theater. As I said, we call the program Beyond the Green Room, and it's on David Edwards' Musical Theater Archives page on Facebook. And for those of you who don't know what the term green room means, if there are two or three of you out there, the green room is a place where theater artists, actors and musicians, directors, we all wait to go on stage again. And this is a time when most performing artists are waiting in our big green room right now, and we're revving up our motors for our return to the stage. So I have three very special guests in my virtual green room here. And well, the first one is the gentleman that wrote that song, Having Lunch with Sarah. It's from a musical called No Way to Treat a Lady. It's one of my favorites, and he's a very prolific writer of musical theater. He's an award winner, a Richard Rodgers Award winner, a Drama Desk nominee, the first ever recipient of the Noel Coward Award, and the Fred Ebb Award winner for a body of work, and the body of work is rather extensive. In addition to No Way to Treat a Lady, he's written shows like The Gig and Glimmerglass and The Children's Letters to God, and so on and so on and so on. So my first gentleman I'd like to bring on out of the virtual green room is Doug Cohen, Douglas J. Cohen.
Hey, David. How are you doing?
Hi, Doug. How are you?
Okay, this is quite an honor. Thank you for inviting me for your inaugural.
Oh, listen, this is terrific. I'm going to get to a question for all three of you very soon, but I just want to introduce my two other friends who are coming on. This lovely lady I have known for many years, and she is an actress and a singer and one of the funniest people I know. She's been on Broadway in a long list of shows: Thoroughly Modern Millie, Dreamgirls, Swinging on a Star, Into the Woods, oh gosh, Honky Tonk Nights, Eubie. She's been all over regional theater and off-Broadway, and recently she's had a great success with a one-woman show about the great Ethel Waters, and we're going to talk to her about that as well. Will you please say hello to Terry Burrell?
Ta-da!
Oh boy, it's great to see your smiling face.
You. All I could think when you picked up the phone was actors.
A director friend of mine that I've worked with many times said, getting started is the hardest thing. After that, it's all gravy. You know, tech is easy. After the first, whenever I direct, I just dread that first moment. And it wasn't until I was in the shower about an hour ago where I thought, oh, I know what to do.
I know. I've had that moment. I've had those moments.
Okay, well, let me bring on our third wonderful panelist. This man is the true definition of what you would call a Renaissance man. He is an actor, a Tony nominee for Starmites. He was in the original cast of Forever Plaid. He has been in how shall I put this delicately, several of the most infamous Broadway musical flops on Broadway, Rags, Ain't Broadway Grand, Anna Karenina, but he's been all over regional theater, and he's had a great success as a director as well. Amazing Grace is the big Broadway musical that he directed. I've worked with him on numerous projects. The Wild Party, the original Wild Party, and Almost Maine, and something that I'm in awe of, the fact that he not only was a performer, but the director of a fine and private place off-Broadway. That's no easy feat. I've attempted it a couple of times, and he's worked with Frank Wildhorn. He's put together shows even for Princess Cruise Line. So talk about versatility. So let's bring him on. Gabriel Barre.
Cheers. Pass the butter, please.
Yes. Everybody, please, since we're having a virtual brunch, please. Oh, good. Terry, I can't believe you. Oh, yeah.
Go.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, it's vodka. Lying.
Gabe, I just had a very tense moment. It is Barry, isn't it? The way
Yes,
you
it is.
pronounce
Yes, it is.
I've been saying it for years, but every once in a while I hear someone say Gabe Barre. I guess they come from the ballet background. I don't know. But
You sound like a law firm, by the way, Cohen, Barre, and Burrell. It really does sound like litigation.
Thank you. Let's go.
Barry and
Let's
Burrell.
go.
Well, we
Let's
sort
go.
of did it in reverse alphabetical order, so I hope that's okay. So I to kind of open our discussion today, I'm gonna pull a fast one and ask each of you, because I have a memory of how I met each of you and the first time we worked together, but it may not match up with your memory. And actually, Doug, you inspired me to ask this question, and I'll tell you later if you don't remember. So just by way of opening up the conversation, I'd love to know what your memory of our first meeting is and how we first collaborated. So Terry, why don't you go first, darling?
I want to say that we did Men of La Mancha together. Did we do Men of La Mancha together up at in Rochester?
Yes, Jiva Theater. Yes.
Jiva Theater, yes.
You were a magnificent Aldonza.
Aldonza.
And we had a lot of laughs. And I remember it was sort of a cut-down production where there were only 2 other ladies in the show. So it was a heavy lift. And it wasn't the easiest road for me for a number of reasons. But it was a beautiful production. And we were up there in cold Rochester.
That's right.
For a long winter. Right? Yeah. And, Man of La Mancha is something that I've done many times since. I don't know if you have, but
I've only done it that one time. That was it.
I don't know whether I should say congratulations, lucky you, or I hope you get to do it again. Okay, Dave, how about you? What do you remember?
Okay, now I may get this wrong because, frankly, you're synonymous with friends in the theater. I mean, I think of all the friends that we've all made in the theater, and you're you're just always there. I've known you for so long, it feels. Now, was the first experience we had working together as actors in a musical called Dolly, or was that down the road?
That I think was it. And for those of you who don't know, this was not
Hello, Dolly. Yeah.
It was not Dolly. No, it was
Hello, Salvador Dali.
Salvador Dali, and a musical about a painter, which is and this was before Sunday in the Park, so I guess it was kind of groundbreaking, but it didn't.
Weren't you the floppy clock and I played the crutch?
Well, we were both. You were Miro, I believe. Were you not?
I think so.
And I played the one surrealist painter that I had never heard of. His name was Tanguy, and I did a research on Tanguy as any serious actor should or would, I guess. And I went to the museum, the Museum of Modern Art, and I saw exactly 3 of his paintings. And they all looked like something had been dropped on the floor of a desert or at the bottom of the sea. It looked like little pieces of excrement or something. So, I mean, he was not a very cheerful fellow. But that's all I'll say on that. But we did work together on a wonderful production of Jacques Brel that you directed. You know, talk about the horse's mouth. You've had so much experience with Brel. It was one of the most challenging productions, I think, physically. Gabe, if you haven't worked with Gabe, you guys, as a director, he certainly pushes you to do the best you can and do the most you can. One of the things I remember was 9:30 in the morning, you having me rehearse the number Jackie, and you had a brilliant idea of how to stage it, but I was tearing up cardboard boxes and rolling down the rake at 9:30 in the morning.
Well, you know, we should explain.
And
I was
yes,
obsessed. I was so taken with Brel's background and his. I believe he worked at a cardboard box factory in Belgium before he left his family and moved to Paris to pursue a career writing and singing his own songs. And I was just obsessed with that sort of vacant occupation of like making empty cardboard boxes. It just felt like the opposite of what he ended up doing with his life, was creating these songs that spoke about life and the human experience from the inside out. And there was so much soul and meat to those lyrics, as you know. So I think, yeah, and that's the premise of that particular number was that you were at work in the cardboard box factory, and you got hit on the head, I think, and had to roll down the rake. And the whole song Jackie was a delusion of some sort.
it was a great idea.
You were terrific in that, by the way, and that was after Dolly, though, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was after Dolly. Yes, it's very difficult for me to say that title without going.
Don't resist. Don't resist. Don't hold back.
I kept waiting for them to give me a big red gown with the sequins, but then again, I wasn't playing Dolly. So, but it was in it. I think I do remember wearing a loincloth from the waist down and a cop's uniform from the waist up in one scene, and Salvador Dali being pushed out onto the stage, sitting on a rolling toilet bowl with nuns rolling out toilet paper.
Good grief.
And nuns in garter belts. So it really is kind of surprising that this show never went on from there. But that.
Are you still wearing that costume as we're speaking? You might be underneath.
From the waist down, yes. I don't. I didn't ask. Most of these virtual meetings lately are done without pants, but I do have pants on today. I didn't ask you whether you're having any issue. I do have pants. They're not exactly tuxedo pants, but they'll do. So Doug, since you inspired this question, and I'll tell you when it was. You came out to see a production of a Moliere play that I did a couple of years ago in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And on the way back when we were driving, you, out of the clear blue sky, you said, "Do you remember the first time we met?" Thinking I wouldn't. So,
and now I don't even remember the conversation. First of all, I want to explain to your viewers that I am not in a bunker. Okay, this is part of a garage. I just want to disavow that rumor. But everyone has such attractive backdrops. I'm very jealous. But anyway, back to the question. I feel like I've always known you, David Edwards. Like we went to kindergarten together somehow. But I have a feeling we met through theater works. I think it was through Columbus. Did you play King Ferdinand?
No. Yeah, I had to think.
Columbus is not a very popular figure right now, so I don't think they're going to revive that show anytime soon.
No, actually, I will tell you, we were both singing in the ensemble.
Wait, I can remember. Yes. It was either Blitzstein or Bernstein.
Blitzstein.
Blitzstein. Yes, and you told me that you were in a Broadway musical when you were very young, and it was somehow involved Dick Harper.
Well, that's another one that never got on. It was. You're exactly correct. That's where we met. We were sitting next to each other and I guess we were both in the baritone section, singing Blitzstein together, and we had a lot of breaks while other people were learning their parts. But the project, when I was a little boy, I was involved with a show that never got on, written by Yip Harburg, about the Children's Crusades, and I was to have the juvenile lead. I was 11 or 12 years old until I outgrew it. I actually inherited it from an actor by the name of Scott Jacoby, who was in Golden Rainbow with Steve and Edie. And I sort of inherited this when he got too old for it. And we did tons of backers auditions, and it was a wonderful piece, but it's always with Yip Harburg's work, it was topical. And it took so long to raise the money and not raise the money that it just sort of went by the wayside. And
I'm sorry.
It was called. The composer was Jeff Alexander, who wrote a lot of film music, TV music, but as far as I know, no other Broadway musicals. But it was called "What a Day for a Miracle." And the other thing, Doug, is that I did your children's musical, Charles Dickens' Christmas.
Yes, see, that was your work.
And of course, No Way to Treat a Lady. To our listeners, that song in the beginning of our program was, of course, from No Way to Treat a Lady, that Doug wrote book, music, and lyrics. And it's a marvelous show that's been done all over the country and in the West End.
You know that.
And I'm sorry?
I don't want to, first of all, take away from your marvelous contribution to that show. That was the production that we did together was at Florida Studio Theater in 2000. Is that right?
It could be. I was 18.
So was I.
And Kevin DeLaguila was in it.
Yes, Kevin DeLaguila,
Lauren Moxon, and Kathy Helenda, right?
Yeah. This he remembers, who was in his show. This he remembers.
Yeah, I can tell you also who auditioned for the show. But anyway, it was a really
well. I remember that I got lucky because I was supposed to do another show in New York, and I was on vacation, and it was canceled while I was sitting in the hot tub on vacation. And I came home and went in and auditioned, and there you were in the room, and I was so delighted. And I want to tell our listeners, too, that, what was it, about 2 years ago, we did a marvelous anniversary tribute to the show at 54 Below, where it's only a 4-character musical. Well, it's a multi-character musical, but it was only 4 actors. And we did sort of a toss the baton from the beginning of the show right through to the end and did all the musical numbers, an array of talent like you've never seen. I was the only one on that stage I'd never heard of. And we had not that much rehearsal, but it came off magnificently, I thought. And I was doing a matinee out in Jersey, and I had to rush back in time for a half hour. I barely got there in time. And Kevin Chamberlain came up to me and said, "Are you David? I think we have a scene together. Do you want to go over it?" So that was about the rehearsal that we had before we did it. But it was a great night, Doug. And you should get many, many more theaters doing that show. It's a wonderful piece.
Well, I was going to say Gabe and I worked on it too.
And I thought you had.
Yeah. So a group called Favored Nations. And And I remember when you were saying that Kevin cornered you and said we ought to like work on the scene because we're going to be doing it in a few minutes. The day that we did our final dress, whatever that, it was a reading. Michael Robert Baker, who played Morris Brummel, had to go to court in Connecticut because he was going through a divorce. And we didn't have him for the whole day until an hour before some of the most influential people in the business came to see the show. So it's like, you know, sometimes they say if you have a clogged toilet backstage that can derail a show, just try having your leading man going to, you know, court to hear from his ex-wife. That's really not a good omen. But other than that, it was great.
Well, Doug, there's also another wonderful anecdote that everybody in the audience at 54 Below that night was, if they didn't already hear this, was made privy to. When you did some filling in, could you tell us about that? When you filled in for a character in a performance of No Way to Treat a Lady?
Yes, that's a very unusual story. When you were saying we're in the green room, and I thought, well, I haven't been in the green room since Cahoe's 1992. I went up to see a production of No Way to Treat a Lady with Adam Grouper, Ray Wills, Kathy Marath, and Darlene Popovich. Darlene was from the West Coast, the Bay Area. And I was there for the third to last performance. And she's doing a number with Ray where he's in drag, and he's pursuing her, and she runs for the door, and he grabbed her arm, and she turned in such a way that she twisted her side. And I heard her on the mic saying, "Let go, let go." And then he didn't, because he was doing what he was directed to do. And apparently it severely injured her ribs. And the next song, she was a wreck. You could tell she had no breast support, nothing was going on. And I turned to my wife and I said, I wonder if we're going to cancel the next two performances, because there were two more left the next day. And we went to our hotel, and before we left, I told David Armstrong, who was David Holgravy at the time, but David Armstrong, I said, listen, if she doesn't go on, let me know. I just was, you know, it was facetious, but I thought, who else knows the role? There's no understudies. The next morning, we're leaving the hotel, and I'm paged on the intercom, and he picks up the phone and he says, Mrs. Brummel? And I said, yes. And he said, you're on in an hour and a half. And I had to go on as that woman, playing 5 different roles.
Oh my God.
And
with a beard, right? Didn't you have a beard?
The beard I have now, it was like, yeah, it was real. Not like just, you know, I would shave it. So yeah, they offered people a refund, and it was a 350-seat theater, and only 2 people during the matinee asked for their refund, and no one asked for a refund for the evening performance because I was off.
I wouldn't have.
I would have paid double for that.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
Well, I'm so glad to know that Gabe directed this as well. I'm looking at the 4 of us, and I thought, well, we should all do a production. I think Terry would be.
Oh my God, I can't believe Terry would never work together. That's just crazy.
We know what we haven't.
But you know when we met? Do you remember when we first met?
No.
I think.
Can you tell that story?
It's not one of those stories, but
shoot.
I know. We could invent one, right? No, I think we met at the ASCAP Musical Theater Workshop in the 1980s.
Oh my
Didn't
gosh.
you participate a lot?
Yeah, I did a number of those. Yeah.
And so that's how I got to know you and your work. And then when I was doing No Way to Treat a Lady in London in 1998, I went to Showboat, and you were doing Julie, and I went backstage and I saw you, and you were so great at that show.
Oh, thank you so much.
I took my parents to see that. We did a better time at that show than we did it at my own show.
No way. I had a great time in London. We were there for about 6 months.
It was a great production. Bizarre was that, right? Was George
Who was
Brazil?
that?
George Brazil.
Yes. Oh, speaking of dish, I do have a little dish.
Okay.
Well, George was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant, and I loved him so much. The show ended, and I don't know how this happened. I think somebody might have passed the word. His dresser invited us to come into his dressing room. George had, of course, left by now. There were, against the wall, 13 bottles of vodka, empty bottles of vodka, like stacked. And George had drunk all that vodka. You know, you can't smell vodka. And he never appeared to be inebriated in any shape, way, or form.
Right. Well, maybe
And actually,
after the show. Might have been after the show.
After the show, I don't think so. That was not the. I don't know. We actually stayed in touch for a number of years after that, through email. It was great. He was just. It was like studying at the feet of a master while you were on stage with him. He was just no effort. You didn't see the work. It was just beautiful. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I always maintain, that if you see the effort, what I want to see is someone disappear into the performance and not see all the sweat that goes into it, because those performances are the ones that are the showy ones that draw attention to themselves. And
they make me tired. I get tired looking at the actor, you know.
Yeah. So Gabe, you know, I'm looking and I thought, did you plan to be in a green room during this?
I'm surprised. I just got all the paint off my hands. I don't know how I did that.
It's
yes,
amazing.
I've been painting since this morning. This is a cabin in my family in South Lake Tahoe. So I'm actually out on a porch. No, so it was painted this way. This cabin dates back to the 1920s. It was probably one of the first properties in this part of the city, or town, I should say. And so it's naturally quaint.
Mm.
Well, I thought you were on 57th Street in your apartment.
I'd like to know where that apartment was.
Exactly. We very recently worked on a project, a new play with music that had a very interesting subject. I wonder if Gabe, do you want to tell us what that was about, and whether we have any hope of continuing with this? Because
it's a really interesting piece. Doug, I'm sure, and Terry will know of a piece called, wait, now I'm going to mess it up. Fine and Dandy, is that it? Or it's, there are two pieces, they're very similar. Fine and Dandy, which was written by Kay Swift, the first female composer to have a show on Broadway, 1920, 29-30. She was married to a very, very wealthy banker, who most people say the role of Annie Warbucks, of Daddy Warbucks, was based on. Jimmy, I'm trying to say his last name correctly. He was a very wealthy man, and of course went through the Depression together. And they started to write this musical, he and his wife, Kay Swift. Meanwhile, Kay was having a relationship with George Gershwin, fairly open one, as George wasn't married, but he was. They had a relationship for over 10 years. Really, it was friends and more than friends, and they gave each other gifts. And she very openly critiqued his music, and some say influenced it. So it's a really and George was part of their family. They would play cards together, and so it was a very interesting triangular relationship while these amazing shows were being written by George Gershwin and Kay Swift and her husband, who was the lyricist for their work together. So a wonderful playwright was given the opportunity to work on the book to this, and he started looking into this relationship. Turned out all three of them, by the way, were also seeing this really twisted psychoanalyst across the street. They lived on the upper 70s, and a psychoanalyst across the street was pitting them against each other. He was a sort of guru at the time in the late 20s, and so it just became more and more interesting. And the playwright proposed doing the show about the making of Fine and Dandy rather than rewriting the book. And so that went through the estate, and we've now been working on that. It's a sort of a play with music. Both the actors of George Gershwin and Kay Swift have to play piano very well, and it's sort of a bedroom farce with a grand piano as the bed, as I've described it. And so they revolve around this piano, both literally and figuratively through the show, as they try to work through their relationship and create a new musical. So it's a really interesting piece. And David played the twisted psychologist, and Paxton the butler, and did an exemplary job.
Yes.
Yeah, going against type. You were fantastic as always.
Did Gershwin actually write music for Fine and Dandy?
No,
Right?
no. But Kay Swift did. She's the composer, and her husband is the lyricist. So it's a really interesting piece, and one of those hybrid pieces that I like that aren't full. It's not just a play with music, but it's also not just a musical. It's kind of a fun in-between piece that I think most people find interesting, whether they have any connection to the characters or not.
So was this? Did someone else bring the idea to you first to revamp Fine and Dandy, or was this your idea? Or
no, this was the playwrights, and I'm blanking on his name, but I'll think of it in 1 second. Thank you, David Cottle. And David was approached by Aaron Gandy, who is our music director, who had been working with one of Kay's granddaughters, who is still alive and in charge of the estate. And so they enlisted David at first to look at the book, and it was David's idea to then really expand it and make it more about the making of Fine and Dandy rather than a reworking of the book. They had done an attempt in the early 2000s, I think, and they did a cast recording with a wonderful cast.
That Aaron was the music director.
The score is fantastic, yeah. So it sort of started with that, but then rather than shift into a full-blown revival, because the book had some problems, of course, and so it sort of became what is currently called Duet for Three, that Dave wrote. And David and I've been a fan of his plays for some number of years, doing many living room readings in my living room and so on, just to hear his work, which I'm sort of entranced with. And it was David who suggested me for this project as well. So it's the first chance we've had to work on it. We developed it through a Moss Repertory Theater, and we're hoping to do a production when any of us can at some point.
Yeah. And Doug, no wonder you were given the first ever Noel Coward Award, because I can't think of another person who has either variously or 2 out of 3 or done all 3 writing assignments on a musical as book, music, and lyrics. And all of your subject matter is so different.
Thanks for observing that. Yeah.
So what do you usually instigate the ideas, or do they come to you from somewhere else?
It's a good question. I used to. I happened upon No Way to Treat a Lady when I saw the movie, and I really knew. I mean, it was a column. It was a quest. We talked about Man of La Mancha. This was a quest. You know those feelings, where just nothing will deter you? Absolutely nothing. And that was the same with the gig, too. But then, like Rob Roth, who directed Doing the Piece, he brought The Opposite of Sex to me. And I loved working on that piece. And he brought another show to me, a book, actually, a New York Times best-selling book, which we're right now acquiring the rights to and doing the demo. Dan Ellis brought The Evolution of Man to me when it was called Nine Wives, which was based on his novel, published his novel. And then I'm working on a piece called Mudville, which YouTube brought to me. And it's very cool. It's about what happens after Casey strikes out, you know, and it's about heroes and what defines a hero. And the hero of the game isn't always the hero that you are in life, and vice versa. So now I'm sort of relying on a lot of other factors to guide me to those choices. And it's much better that way in some ways because it's very hard to find projects. So I'd always hoped after Know Where to Treat a Lady that people would actually start engaging me in work, you know, and it didn't really happen. It happened with theater work.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't think of any other examples when that happened. And then really it's through my association with other writers and directors like Rob that these things come about. And that's really the nature of the business for me at least. You know, there wasn't any regional theater that said, Doug, we have to have, there's one great exception. The Berkeley Playhouse in Berkeley, California, contacted my collaborator Cheryl Davis. We did Barnstormer together, which is the.
I'm glad you mentioned that show. I saw a reading of it in New York, and I just loved it. And I was hoping that would.
Well, before the pandemic hit, we were actually on a nice road with that show. It was gaining a lot of traction. There was a group in New York that wanted to do a reading in April, and there was another theater that was asking about a major theater in the Seattle area. Village Theater, I have to say. Nothing wrong with saying it. So, you know, there were a lot of things that were coming up. At this stage, I'm not sure with any of us what the options are.
Right.
But
yeah.
Barnstormer led to Berkeley wanting to do a piece to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Selma, of the march in Selma.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cheryl came up with a great concept, linking it to also the 2008 Oakland Bridge with Prop 8, opposition to Prop 8, because there's a lot of ways in which these two movements intersect. And it was 3 generations of a biracial family that are connected to these two extraordinary seminal events. And so they commissioned it, and their artistic director, Elizabeth McCoy, was very instrumental in this. And we did the world premiere there, and it went really well. And it was one of the proudest moments in my life, truly. I love this show. And right now, it's very timely. Very timely.
I'll say it is. And the basic story is about an aviatrix, right?
Bridges. Bridges is very timely because it deals with the Voting Rights Act, and it deals with you know, LGBTQ rights. Everything is still in question. You know, it's just we move forward, but we're not crossing that bridge. And and Barnstormer is just one of those stories that you just go, wait a minute, why don't I know about this? You know, there was this African American woman back in the 1920s, and she got her aviation license, and no one would teach her in this country, so she had to go to France. And brought that flight here and started introducing it to anyone who was disenfranchised, people of color, women. It was this amazing thing, but she unfortunately died, rehearsing for one of her stunts. Oh. And she had a few more years for a better press agent, or had she lost at sea, like Amelia, we'll all be discussing her. But we do know her a little bit in musical theater history because she's Trix in Drowsy Chaperone. Trix is based on her.
Okay.
But it's a wonderful, wonderful story, and I'm really proud of both of those shows. Cheryl Davis is a wonderful collaborator, and I hope we hear more about those shows.
We will somehow. Terry, when you did your cabaret, Terry has been doing well, she just started last week with another friend of mine, tossing the baton back and forth, Courtney Collins, who I've worked on several projects with. I hope maybe we'll bring her on this forum sometime. And they do a virtual cabaret to help raise money for the Alliance Theater. And Tony and I were watching it the other night. And he said, well, you rave about Terry, but I never saw her perform before. And I said, she's so funny. She has the most infectious laugh. You know, when you hear
Did you notice the kale on the teeth? Did you get that moment? Did you get that?
I wasn't sure whether it was licorice or
you
what.
You couldn't really see.
Was, but yeah. And the problem is also you have no energy when you perform. You just And I have you ever used that laugh in a character? I only hear it off stage. I can imagine you must. In no way, it would serve very well in No Way to Treat a Lady with all the mother figures. But if you know the show, there's one actress who plays both the mother of the serial killer and the mother of the cop who's trying to trap him, and all of the victims of the serial killer. So it's a quick change act, and it's just a tour de force. I think you'd be hysterical in it. But talking about instigating projects, you know, people tell me all the time, you have to make your own work. And you did that with Ethel, did you not?
I did. It took, well, I'm sure that Doug and Gabriel can attest to this. It took years. I mean, I think I started like back in 1993 because I had a sense then that a time was going to come when I was going to need to have something to do on my own. And I never intended to write it. I just did the research. I didn't consider myself a writer. You know, when you're female and you are aging in the business, you know, it was a few years ago, I went to Pearl Studios and it was like culture shock because it was hardly anybody that was under 30 in there, you know, and that was me once upon a time. But someone had said, my friend Michael Leslie had said, you should do Ethel Waters because she's in danger of being forgotten. And I started doing the research and I found I started vibing with her, you know, and some other people had said, oh, do Josephine Baker, but I felt like she had been done to death. And I just did not vibe with her. But it was not until 2010 that some little voice spoke to me and said, if you don't do this and do it now, it's never going to get done. Mm. And I didn't quite know what the shtick was going to be. What was it? And a friend of mine came over, was talking to me, and I'm just watching the way she's expressing herself. It was Loretta Devine. She was in Atlanta to shoot for Colored Girls, and she was very free and very loose in the way she was speaking to me. And I thought, what if Ethel could say anything she wanted to say, knowing that no matter what she said or how she said it, that she would be forgiven for it? What would she say? And how would she say it? And I thought, let me show the persona behind the private persona behind the public persona. I would love to show moments of vulnerability, of doubt, of really, and so we started in the middle, you know, when she had this amazing career. And then suddenly she's in her early 50s, nothing. A lot of it her own fault. She just wasn't reading the tea leaves. And I thought, what if she could have that moment of honesty? And, you know, to be able to tell some truths, some hard truths in a way that did not alienate anybody. You know, I mean, to tell it with a sense of humor and without a sense of victimization, which is often hard to do. And we workshopped it at Walnut Street Theater. I never worked so hard in my life. And then we took it to Alabama Shakespeare. And then 2 years later, the Alliance Theater produced it. I had never, ever been part of that level of production before. I've never been to a production meeting, ever. I've never been to a marketing, never, ever. You know, you're usually on the other side of the table. But they really brought it to the level that we wanted to bring it to. There's still changes that we've made. And there's still life with it. At this point, I just don't want to go to this theater and that theater and this theater. We don't have to prove that it works anymore. It works. We don't have to prove it. So the idea is to do it again with the intent of really taking it further, whatever that will be.
Have you done it with Amos? Has Amos been involved with it at all?
No, not at all. It went to Walnut Street Theater.
But not I'm just surprised because that would be a great alliance, I would think.
It would.
Yeah. Well, it's something to look into.
Yeah.
Donna's
I have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, Donna Trinkoff. We should let her know about this.
Okay.
Are you? Is it something that? Of course, we all don't want to do things this way, but is it something that could possibly be done virtually if things drag on for a little while?
We have not gotten into discussing it yet, but there is a theater that is interested in streaming because I outside of the archival taping, I had it taped, I had it recorded. So
did you get permission of the actress first?
I sure did. Something like that. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. Yeah. And it's an easy show to do coming out of this. It's very nimble because it's just me. I mean, you meet nine other people, but I morph into those people. So it's just two musicians and me. It's very easy to move it and mount it if we are allowed to do things like that.
Well, Equity, it seems, has come up with some sort of an agreement for that sort of thing. And I had an experience about a month ago with a play that I watched a Zoom reading of, and they were, the playwrights wanted to talk about me directing another Zoom production. I gave them some ideas. They ultimately went with somebody else. But I realized that there are things techniques that we haven't thought of that might be possible that we can take forward. But it is difficult when you have 3 or 4 people that have to interact and where you need to see facial expressions and there's 2 or 3 different locations. But with Ethel, it sounds like you could do this fairly easily, and
you could do it. You could do it on stage fairly easily. I mean, if you did it in Zoom or StreamYard, then you run into the issue of how do you play the music. I mean, you'd have to be, if you're in the same space, that's fine. But they've been doing these virtual choirs, and I found out. Well, you're a musician, so they lay a track, they put a voice on, everybody else sings to the track, emails it to whoever is engineering it, and then they edit it. So, that's what we'll be doing for my next virtual show with my sisters. We wanted to sing together, and then we tried to have a rehearsal on Zoom, and it was an absolute.
It's mad. It's mad, but we have
remember Superman in the Bizarro world? That's what it was like.
Have any of you actually accompanied? I mean, I don't know if any of you play the piano, but accompanying people through Zoom is so difficult.
No, you can't do it. Yeah.
It's certain songs like ballads you can kind of fudge it, but when you go walk the pace, a 4/4 song becomes a 5/4 song. That's the only way you can work. Everything in my life is now 5/4.
Well, Philip Glass sounds great on Zoom.
Has anybody watched Billy Stritch's show on Thursday evenings at 8:00? He's brilliant, and it sounds wonderful. And he's just sitting at the piano, playing and singing.
Is he doing fantastic? Is it through Zoom?
He's doing it. I think it's Facebook Live, so I don't know if it's Zoom that he's using.
Unfortunately, we're always, we're all sequestered here and as a family, so we're usually watching something on Netflix. I'm sorry that I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't watched Billy because I think he's tremendous. But
he is.
At least he's his own entity. That's the thing. And I think the Latin comes over, they're neighbors. So they probably sheltered more or less together, and that's okay. But I think if he were accompanying someone outside of his room, that would be a problem. But yeah, pianist vocalists are now, it's their medium. Let's face it.
Yeah. You know, and I have a pianist that's in my home, and we all got our COVID tested. And
Yeah.
it's a young actor here in Atlanta, and he plays the piano downstairs in the room where we record. But when I watched it afterwards, I could see that sometimes my mouth was not in sync with what I was singing. But I think people know that today. They accept that. It wasn't too bad. You know.
Well, that's the good thing about Milli Vanilli. They kind of
Ooh, isn't that
Prepared us.
terrible?
they set the
Fair
tone.
God.
I've had that problem
grief.
for years. My mouth is not in sync with what is coming out
What's
of
in your head?
You know, it's
Well, I was just
terrible.
famous people who had disastrous lip syncing, and the first one came to mind was Milli Vanilli.
Well, here's things that you know. Of course, we rehearsed the show before we did it, and Dave knows this. I have my neighbor at the other end of the cul-de-sac, this lovely Japanese lady. She's going to be my running gag. Wait till you hear what she says next week, and she didn't want to do it. She said, "Oh, Daddy, with my broken English," I said, "Oh, honey, you're gonna be perfect." And so she comes over, and we were rehearsing it. Here's the thing we've discovered, because my sisters came on at the end. I tied two things. I tied this one thing together since we couldn't sing, is that you can't talk at the same time.
Yeah.
Because she, you know, she said something and I was like, say that. And they said, you can't interrupt her. You have to wait until she finishes. Or you have to wait until your sister finishes because of the lag.
There is some settings in Zoom where you can adjust that in the sound settings to minimize it, but it is still a problem, and latency is definitely a problem. I've been developing some shows and been doing a number of Zoom readings, and music is the hardest thing on that platform per se.
It is.
But then even having two people say something at the same time is challenging, like you said, Terry.
Well, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to, before we leave the subject of Ethel, you know, there's a lot of people watching, at least I hope there are, who don't know, unfortunately, who Ethel Waters is. And so our aim is to educate here as well. So can you, I mean, I think that she was one of the most unique talents we've ever seen. Great actress, singer, interpreter of song, but just tell us a little bit about who Ethel Waters was.
Well, Ethel Waters was a huge star in the 30s and the 40s, the 50s. At the end of her life, most people knew her as part of the Billy Graham Crusades. And the song that she was famous for was His Eyes on the Sparrow, which her grandmother had taught her. But before that, she did that movie Cabin in the Sky with Lena Horne, which was kind of her undoing because she hated Lena Horne. As a matter of fact, in the show, she calls her Lena Horny. And Lena was young and beautiful, and she had not quite developed her talent yet. She didn't quite know who she was yet. And people were fawning and fussing over her. And I think Ethel may have had a slightly elevated opinion of herself as compared to Lena, but some things transpired that put her in a bad light, and she was not used in Hollywood anymore. But anyway, she was born in 1896 in Philadelphia. I mean, she was like a generation away from slavery, really. Lived under the most heinous circumstances imaginable. You cannot imagine that level of poverty. You cannot. We're not talking about indoor plumbing or any of that. You know, it was a shack, part of a shanty. But she had this beautiful voice. And at 17, she went to a party. She sang. Some people there, vaudeville group, Butterbeans and Susie, took her on tour. She worked as a maid in a hotel with her mother. And she asked her mom to hold her job for her because she just knew that, you know, she was going to be coming back. Never looked back. She was very feisty, extremely feisty. There was an incident in a theater in Macon, Georgia, where she wanted the white theater owner to tune the piano, and he refused, and she refused to go on. And the place was filling up and people were starting to get very angry. And so he gave in, and he refused to pay her, and she had to sneak out of town because he had hired 2 police officers to beat her once she left the hotel. I mean, just adventure after mission. One time she got into a terrible car accident. I mean, really tore her leg up, went to a hospital where she was put in the colored section. And it was a white nurse who saved her life, who managed to get her out because it was really a hospital for debtors. I mean, they make debtors out of these black patients. If they couldn't pay, they had to stay and they'd have to work it off. You know, I mean, adventure after adventure after adventure, but to look at her circumstances, and that's, I think, the point of her life, that the circumstances of your life do not and should not determine where you go in that life. You know, I mean, nobody would have thought, looking at this little black child in 1896, that she would grow up to become this major, major star, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. So
it's like Bessie Coleman, you know, she started out in Waxahachie, Texas. She and it was her job to, you know, go up and down the fields and collect the cotton and also keep books and all the things that menial jobs. And she built herself up to Chicago as a manicurist and figured out that she wanted to fly.
That's
and
right.
She made it happen.
It's amazing. Exactly. I mean, Irving Berlin wrote for this woman, you know.
2 standards
Yeah.
as Thousands Cheer, and they couldn't be more different. Heat Wave and
Supper Time.
He introduced both of those songs.
And I'll tell you something else about Irving Berlin. Her white castmates were angry about the fact that she got so much applause at the end of the show. And so they wrote him a letter and they said that they didn't think that she should be allowed to take the bows with them. And Irving Berlin wrote them all back and said, okay, that's fine. We don't have to do that. I'll take all of the bows out. All of them. Well, that didn't happen. So I guess they acquiesced.
Or they would have gone back to the green room.
I don't think she sat in the green room with them. But what an amazing personality. Not necessarily the nicest person in the world, but you know, I had to make her likable.
Well, I don't know. She's always seemed likable to me and her on-screen persona in Member of the Wedding, even with wonderful actors like Julie Harris, who's one of my favorites. He somehow made everybody else around her seem like they were acting, and she was just being. And
she was just being. She was being her grandmother there. She never took any formal acting lessons ever. She just had good instincts.
She was amazing. She was amazing. I'm so glad you're doing a project like that, and it's inspirational to all of us performers who say, yeah, I really should instigate something of my own. There's somebody in the other room who's telling me constantly that we should instigate a project of our own. And this is it right now. So we'll see what.
This is it. This is it. This is the life we know, the only life we have. So go for it. You know, we are constantly critiquing ourselves, you know, and questioning ourselves. And, you know, there's enough people out there that will critique and question what we do.
No shortage of those.
We're actually to our little intermission soon.
Oh, okay.
So that you can replenish your drinks or go to the can or whatever you need to do. But before we do, I'm thinking here, if you notice, I'm sitting in my dining room and I have some Don Quixote memorabilia. I've done Man of La Mancha maybe 12 times more than you have, Terry. And it's become a blessing and a curse. And there was a story that I told you when we did Man of La Mancha that has become rather infamous. I tell every cast, whenever they think that something disastrous might happen or something might go wrong, I remind them of a time when I was playing Don Quixote at a little theater, and we left out The Impossible Dream on opening night by mistake.
What?
Yeah, and and Gabe, I know you know this is true because you were in the audience.
I was in the audience. Yes, I was a proud member of that audience.
A big bruiser who was always late for his entrance for the combat scene. And he got a lecture from the director at half hour saying, "Don't you leave that man out there on the stage alone. You have to come in on your entrance." So he came in a scene early. Aldonza turned and said, "I must go. Pedro is waiting." And she has a false exit. And then she comes back and says, "Why do you do these things that you do?" And it leads into The Quest, the most famous song in the show. And so she says, "I must go." Pedro is waiting, walks off, slightly off, and just about turns around. And this guy comes out and he says, "Keep me waiting, will you, whore?" and slaps her to the ground. And all of a sudden, we're into the combat. And there are chorus members running in states of undress because they're not ready to go on yet. And my life flashed before my eyes before I knew it, but there was a bucket on my head and I was inside a ladder going around. And I kept thinking, you have those out-of-body experiences to say, well, how can we fix this? What can we do? But there was no intermission. We finally were doing the show as written with no intermission. And I thought, well, there's a little reprise at the end, maybe, but Aldonza isn't on for that. And it was kind of sickening. I did stick my head out into the wings at one point, and I asked where the director was, and I was told by the stage manager that he threw up in the men's room and went home. And so we were on our own. And when I was dying in the bed later, and she says, "Don't you remember when you said to me?" And it was all I could do to say, "No, I've been here all night. I don't think I said that at all." And we lived through that. The critics were invited to come back at another time. Both of them said, "No, thank you. We've seen enough." Luckily, they wrote us love letters, and one of them mentioned a minor gaffe that took place that night. But my favorite thing that happened all night was that Gabe came backstage, and he said, "It was great, but I thought you sang more of that song." So, in my own self-centered, actually way, I thought my life was over, and next day it was all forgotten. But it makes for a wonderful anecdote. And whenever I go back to that show, I say, things could be worse. You could leave out "Hello, Dolly."
Oh, Lord.
I've been thinking of that anecdote all breakfast because of your beautiful illustration up there, which is headless, just so you know, for us.
Oh,
behind your right shoulder.
Oh, is it? See, I take direction.
The illustration up there is beautiful. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
But you must have really made that show work, because that's the true test of a show when you have an iconic song like that, and if you take it out and it still works, then
that's right.
Yeah. Well, it does appear a couple of times, and maybe once too many, if you break the intermission. And yet, because doing it out at the Dinner Theater in Westchester, they insisted we have an intermission. And of course, the only way to break it up is to do a little half reprise of that song. And on opening night, I got my armor caught on some of the draping, and I almost didn't make it back on stage. And just in enough time to raise my lance and sing "This Is My Quest." And the Aldonza at that time thought, "Stop fooling around." He thought I was making a joke, but I was not. But I mean, you could probably, if I lift this up, you can probably see. Oh, I don't know. Whoops.
Yeah, there you go.
I tell you.
Don't lift it up. Well, when we did, I don't know that I think we're supposed to. Are we close to taking the?
Yeah, we're gonna take a little bit of an intermission to.
Okay. Because I have a story about that particular Man of La Mancha that we did.
Well, we'll come back and just have a more anecdotes, and I want to talk about things maybe that if we haven't already, what we're planning for the future and maybe take a few questions. I love you all. Listen to this beautiful intermission music. This is Terry Burrell singing Imagination.
Oh, Lord.
Oh,
Swinging
yeah.
on a sweat ball.
Oh, well, we'll find out about that afterwards.
Imagination is funny. It makes a cloudy day sunny. Makes a bee think of honey, just as I think of you. Imagination is crazy. Your whole perspective gets hazy. Starts you asking a daisy what to do, what to do. Have you ever felt a gentle touch, and then a kiss, and then find it's only your imagination again? Oh well, imagination is silly. You go around willy-nilly. For example, I go around wanting you, and yet I can't imagine that you'd want me to. Have you ever felt a gentle touch, and then a kiss, and then find that it is only your imagination again? Oh well, imagination is silly. You go around willy-nilly. For example, I go around wanting you, and yet I can't imagine that you'd want me to.
As an old friend,
Yay!
Irving Barnes said, you sang that song.
That's beautiful,
I'm like, oof.
Terry. Beautiful.
That was
Thank
from
you.
the original cast recording of Swinging on a Star. And it was a review of the music of Johnny Burke, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So here, you all know that I am a collector and an historian of musical theater memorabilia and recordings and trivia, mostly. So Johnny Burke did write a couple of Broadway musicals that weren't very successful. But there's a standard that was in, well, many standards in the show that Terry was in, Swinging on a Star. One of them is called Here's That Rainy Day.
Yes.
And it was from a Broadway musical. So your quiz question is, what Broadway musical was it from?
Google. Let's get it from Google.
Oh, Doug knows it already.
Can I say?
You
Of course
can.
it does.
Carnival in Flanders?
Absolutely.
Wow.
It comes right trippingly off the tongue, doesn't it? It's a household. They're going to do it in summer stock next year with Sutton Foster and
Really?
no, actually, Carnival in Flanders. I think it lasted something like one night, but that song was introduced by Dolores Gray, and she got a Tony nomination for it. So yeah, and the other book show that I think he wrote was called Donnybrook, which was a musical version of The Quiet Man, and that one didn't run very long either. But so Terry, you had a little. It seemed like you had a little dish about Swinging on a Star.
No, not Swinging on a Star. It was the Man of La Mancha that we did, because we did it in 1992. And I'm only saying this because it's pertinent to the story. In 1992, I'd already done Dreamgirls. I had done UB and I think Honky Tonk Nights, whatever. So one night, we used to come up in that elevator to exit the theater. And there's an audience member there. And everybody was in the, we used to do that cabaret in the back. Uh-huh. We'd all meet for drinks. And she stopped. She says, you, what a voice. I'm telling you, 2-3 years tops off-Broadway. I said, thank you so much. Some of my cast members, and I told them, I went back there, told them what she said, and they said, what did you say? I said, thank you so much, because she wasn't trying to be insulting, but I said, but you think maybe she didn't read my bio?
I don't know. I don't feel like people read bios anymore in the playbill, and I mean, this is a little pet peeve of mine, I have to say.
I read them.
Well, I do too, but they get shorter and shorter because we have to include the man who wiped so and so's behind and who adjusted this. I mean, not that all those people are not worthy of credit. We're all in this together, but there was a time when you went to the theater and the star's bio, even if it was a star you never heard of, was 3 pages long, and it was a real bio. And it made you feel like you were really seeing somebody important up there. And now, you get no more than 15 words, and a lot of people say, thanks, Mom.
I know.
And Jesus, and all of this. And
their film credits, but not their theater credits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what it does is it kind of, it prompts people to say, well, what do I need to read that stuff for? It's not really very interesting. It's one of those things that somehow lowers the bar of the particular special event quality of going to the theater. And I love that everybody in the ensemble gets and the casting director and all of that, but I
have a feeling this woman would not have read anything.
Yeah, well, you're lucky it wasn't a dinner theater. She probably wouldn't have read the menu. Yeah, I was told once that you'll make it. Maybe you should go on the Gong Show. So I don't that was when I was working on a cruise ship. So we've Gabe, you've done that, and that looked to be that was a high point in a way, to get a gig like that. That's when cruises were paying some money, and Gabe did a review of Stephen Schwartz material for Princess Cruises, and you even released a cast recording of that. So
involved with that, Gabe?
Who was that?
Jason Raitt, was he involved with that as a producer?
I don't believe directly that it's possible. Yes, actually. This was something that I pitched through a person who was in relationship with vice president of entertainment for Princess, and they were looking for magic. And Stephen Schwartz had called me in the 2007-8, and we had talked about doing a show of his music, combining it with magic, but it was on the shelf because of the financial downturn that happened then. Nobody wanted to do a new show that included magic because it costs more money to add magic to anything. So they had 7 or 8 other projects they were pitching, but I got them to pitch this idea of magic to do, of Stephen's, recontextualizing Stephen's music and adding magic to almost every song. And they took it, and it also parlayed into a 4-year relationship with Stephen and Princess Cruises, who he became sort of a curator of material, not all his music and his material necessarily. But this first show was at a time when the cruise industry was trying to really up the game in terms of production level, and they really put their money where their mouth is, and they had a great team, and we had a wonderful Broadway design team. Ken Billington did the lighting and refurbished all the lights, and we had Jim Steinmeier did the magic, and he's done all kinds of stuff with Disney and almost every other magician around. So it was a really great experience, and it's still playing if the cruise industry comes back. It's been playing for 5 years already, and they want to extend it for another 3 or 4. And we did a cast album, which had never been done really for cruise ships. So it was a really great experience, all in all. I really feel for that industry as well. I mean, it's all woven together, I suppose. But they went through a tough time even before it hit the rest of us, and so I hope for all of us that they can come back too, because they were really upping their game, I think, in a lot of the brands.
I have a musical about a cruise ship.
Oh, fantastic!
The Big Time, right?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know that, Doug. I want to read it.
Douglas Carter Bean wrote the book.
Oh, right. Oh, wonderful.
Very funny book and very funny guy. And we did the last big thing that happened in my life before the pandemic was at the McCarter, when he directed the Big Time with Santina Fontana and Debbie Gravitt and Will Swenson, Laura Osnes, Jackie Hoffman, Michael McCormick, Bradley Dean, Simon Beaucourt.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Wonderful.
And we have a great recording from it, which
that's good.
It's supposed to be streamed sometime, so we'll see. Hoping that you'll be able to hear it in your homes.
I can't wait. It's one of the 3 recordings I guess I don't have, so I'm going to be looking forward to it.
I'm surprised you don't have it.
You know, when you collect everything from the Icelandic recording of Little Shop of Horrors, right down to the demo tapes from shows that never got on, it's become a little of an obsession, but it's what I do, and it brings me to doing this show right now. It's kind of like that line from Hello, Dolly, not Dolly, but Dolly, whatever. About how show music is like manure. You have to spread it around, encouraging little things to grow. And having the 3 of you here today, I hope will do that for all of the people who were listening.
Manure, good segue.
Yeah. All right. All right. So it's not the most encouraging metaphor, but Terry inspired me so much this week. What you said near the end of your virtual cabaret. We got this. There's going to be a future, and that's what I want to promote on this program. And hopefully, this program will be around even after the pandemic. Maybe we can all be in the same room. So that we can talk about our craft. There's one thing I used to say that I never cared for I'm really telling tales out of school now, but I used to call it van talk, and that's when you're doing a commuting show from New York, and you all meet the van, and on the way to wherever you're going for the next 20 minutes or hour and a half, everybody talks about what auditions they had that day and how many casting directors they know and all of that. But we never talk about the fun stuff, the craft, the swapping the stories of the fun stuff that happened, and at the same time getting serious about what we want to do with our art and where we want to go. And so this is definitely not van talk. This is green room talk. And I thank you all for being on. And you've all told me a little bit about what you're doing in the future. And we keep our fingers crossed, and we know that it's going to happen sooner or later. All of my projects fell like a house of cards this year. And I just got word that one of them is possibly coming back at the beginning of next year. So
fantastic.
We'll just keep our fingers crossed. And I couldn't have had 3 more amiable, knowledgeable, talented people for my first show here on Beyond the Green Room. And we're gonna. I just want to thank 2 very special people for helping us with this. And first of all, Tony Javid, who is my partner in life, my husband, and who kicked my butt to do this. And
Yay, Tony.
He's sitting in a very hot room over there, listening to all of this, pressing all the buttons and making sure that we come off well. And he won a MAC award as the associate producer of Piano Bar Live, which is another show that you can watch on Facebook every Tuesday night at 7:15, I believe. And the producer of that is Scott Barberino, who I also want to thank because he has given us a tremendous amount of support to do Beyond the Green Room. So I didn't want to stop our broadcast before I thank those 2 very special people. So we're going to have a little playoff with, since I made Doug lead us in with a song and Terry guide us through intermission. It's a sad song. It's a kind of a moody ballad from Starmites with Gabe singing "The Cruelty Stomp." So as we cue this, I will tell you my guests for next week are going to be Dan Goggin and Susan Jacks and Lisa St. Blue. And so we're looking forward to that. And I'll see you all next week.
Great to see you, Doug. Great to see you, Terry. Thank you.
Same here.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
David.
day.
Hugs.
A real honor. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
All.
Thank you.
There's a crazy little ditty that's been bopping around. It'll really hypnotize you with its magical sound. It'll make you do all kinds of things you never did do. So dance to the music of the cruelty. Ooh, the cruelty. The cruelty. The cruelty. The cruelty. The cruelty. The cruelty. Doing that cruelty stomp. You gotta shake, shake, shake. Drives you crazy. Shake, shake, shake. Don't be lazy. Shake, shake, shake. To the music of the cruelty. You gotta shake, shake, shake. Groove and rock now. Shake, shake, shake. Bump and bop now. Shake, shake, shake. To the rhythm of the cruelty. It'll make you feel great. It'll make you feel sweat. It'll take you to heaven on a magical spell. And if you start to feel kooky, well then you know you're on track. Cause by the time it gets spooky, you never get to turn back. Oh no! Dance to the music of the cruelty. Take a chance on the music of the cruelty. Sigh to the music of the cruelty. Fly to the music of the cruelty. Be a sport now. Don't stop short now. The cruelty. The cruelty. The cruelty. Doing that cruelty sound. She wappa doobie da. Ski bop ski dip ski doom ski dibby da da.